Breaking news is unfolding that could dramatically reshape international air travel across the United States. Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin has renewed a controversial warning aimed directly at sanctuary cities, signaling that airports in places like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago could face major disruptions if local governments continue refusing to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. The announcement comes after weeks of unrest and repeated demonstrations outside ICE facilities in the New York region. According to Homeland Security officials, if local authorities refuse to maintain order and protect federal operations, customs processing resources may be reassigned elsewhere. Officials insist that flights themselves would not necessarily be canceled, but without customs officers available to process arriving international passengers, major airports could effectively become domestic-only destinations. For cities that rely heavily on international traffic, tourism, and global business connections, the implications are enormous.
The administration has long opposed sanctuary city policies, arguing that local governments cannot simultaneously benefit from federal infrastructure while refusing to assist with federal immigration enforcement. Homeland Security officials say they are being forced to make difficult decisions about where to deploy limited personnel. Their argument is straightforward. If federal employees are being threatened, blocked, or prevented from carrying out their duties because local authorities refuse to intervene, those officers must be relocated to maintain security and ensure government operations continue. Critics view the proposal as political pressure, while supporters argue it is simply a practical response to lawlessness. Either way, the possibility of customs operations being scaled back at some of the nation's busiest airports has suddenly become a very real topic of debate. Supporters of the move argue that sanctuary cities have created conditions that undermine public safety and encourage illegal immigration. They claim that policies shielding undocumented migrants from federal enforcement have contributed to rising crime, gang activity, and increased pressure on local services. Whether those claims are fully supported by data remains heavily disputed, but the political argument is gaining momentum among those who believe federal immigration laws should be enforced consistently across the country. They contend that cities refusing to cooperate with ICE should not expect unrestricted access to federal resources while simultaneously resisting federal authority. To them, the airport issue is not punishment, but accountability, a way of forcing local governments to confront the consequences of their policies. One reason airports have become the center of this debate is their immense economic importance. New York's JFK airport alone contributes tens of billions of dollars annually to the regional economy. Combined with LaGuardia and Newark, the economic impact reaches staggering levels, supporting businesses, tourism, cargo operations, and thousands of jobs. Any disruption to international arrivals would ripple through hotels, restaurants, transportation networks, and countless other industries. That economic leverage is precisely why the issue has become such a powerful pressure point. If customs processing were significantly reduced, travelers and airlines would be forced to reroute through other cities, potentially redirecting billions of dollars in economic activity away from sanctuary jurisdictions. The debate intensified after renewed protests erupted outside immigration detention facilities in New Jersey. Demonstrators accused ICE of operating facilities with unacceptable conditions and demanded the closure of detention centers entirely. Democratic lawmakers joined calls for investigations and reforms, arguing that the facilities should not exist in their current form. Protesters claimed detainees were being treated unfairly and that the federal government was failing to uphold basic standards. Yet federal officials strongly rejected those accusations, insisting that the facilities meet or exceed required standards and that many public descriptions of conditions are inaccurate or misleading. Homeland Security officials emphasized that individuals housed in detention facilities generally have legal options available to them. They argue that detainees are not being held indefinitely without recourse, and that many are actively pursuing immigration cases or challenging removal proceedings. Federal representatives also point to facility amenities that include recreation areas, libraries, computer access, and legal resources. Supporters of the facilities argue that critics deliberately ignore these details in order to paint a more dramatic picture. Opponents counter that the existence of amenities does not eliminate broader concerns about detention practices or immigration enforcement. As a result, the facilities have become symbolic battlegrounds in the larger national debate over immigration policy.
At the center of the administration's argument is a claim that local authorities have failed to maintain order around federal facilities. Officials say protesters have blocked access routes, disrupted operations, and created safety concerns for employees attempting to report to work. According to Homeland Security leaders, repeated requests for assistance from local and state authorities have not always produced the response they believe is necessary. As a result, federal personnel who would normally handle customs processing at airports may be redirected to support security operations elsewhere. Administration officials insist this is not retaliation, but resource management. If local governments refuse to provide sufficient law enforcement support, they argue, federal agencies have no choice but to shift resources where they are most urgently needed. Critics strongly disagree with that characterization. They argue that linking airport operations to local immigration disputes effectively punishes entire communities for political disagreements. Opponents warn that millions of travelers, businesses, and workers could suffer the consequences of decisions made by political leaders. They view the proposal as an attempt to pressure sanctuary cities through economic and logistical disruption. Supporters, however, maintain that the federal government cannot be expected to provide unlimited services in jurisdictions that actively resist federal law enforcement efforts. The disagreement highlights a growing conflict between local authority and federal authority, one that shows no signs of disappearing anytime soon. Meanwhile, political leaders in affected states find themselves under increasing pressure from multiple directions. Activists demand stronger resistance to federal immigration policies, while businesses worry about the economic fallout of prolonged conflict. Some governors and local officials who previously embraced confrontational rhetoric have begun emphasizing public safety and order, recognizing that any perception of chaos could have serious consequences. As law enforcement presence increases around contentious facilities, some protesters have accused authorities of escalating tensions rather than reducing them. Yet others argue that restoring order is essential if communities are to avoid even more severe disruptions in the future. Ultimately, this controversy goes far beyond airports, detention centers, or even immigration policy itself. It reflects a broader struggle over the balance of power between local governments and the federal government, as well as competing visions for how immigration laws should be enforced. For supporters of the administration's approach, the threat of customs processing reductions represents a logical response to jurisdictions that refuse to cooperate with federal authorities. For opponents, it represents an alarming use of federal power to pressure political opponents. Whatever happens next, one thing is clear. The debate over sanctuary cities has entered a new phase, and the outcome could have far-reaching consequences for travelers, local economies, and the future of immigration enforcement across the United States.